Welcome to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. I'm joined today by Steve Marik of Inside Nebraska. Steve, welcome back to the show. We're happy to have you. Season's almost here, man. How are you feeling?
Yeah, mid-August is here. The weather is getting warmer. I'm ready for some football. I'm kind of tired of fall camp. I don't know about you, Tim, but it's the dog days for the players in fall camp, and they've kind of said as much, as well as Tony White, I think, last Tuesday during a press conference. But it's the dog days for media members covering fall camp too. Let's just get some live football out there.
For sure. Yeah, I think the guys especially, I think everyone's just ready to kind of see some new
Yes.
people, hit some new bodies instead of just
Yeah.
the same old in practice. Thought we'd get together and kind of talk about some of the true freshmen on campus now, how much these guys will play, who will and won't, kind of make some predictions and kind of go through the depth chart as well as we kind of go through this. So we'll go position by position, kind of start obviously at the top, QB position. Dylan Raiola, do we think he'll play? What do you think?
I think so, Tim. I think he's shown enough, to get out there and lead that first team offense. Yeah, I mean, that joking. Obviously, we think he's going to play. We think he's going to start. He's basically the starter. Matt Rule is going to announce it whenever he announces it, and it's not going to shock anybody because he acts just like a starting quarterback, just like you want your starting quarterback to look and act and sound. I mean, when I went to the Big Red Preview open practice that they held couple weekends ago now, Dylan Raiola, he was leading the team out onto the field. I mean, he just looked like a starting quarterback. 6'3", 230 pounds. Physically, he looks ready to go. The arm talent is obviously there. It's really fun watching him throw the ball around and kind of make connections to the veteran receivers in the room like Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, and then also kind of just find the explosive guys like Jalen Lloyd, and some other ones, even Ja'Cory Barney, who we might talk about later in this pod. So you know what, Dylan is the guy right now as far as I'm concerned, and I think everybody's kind of just assuming that's going to happen, just waiting on the official word now.
Yeah. And the other freshman quarterback in the room, Daniel Kalen. I'm actually curious here how much do you think the addition of Jalen Gramstad affects how much, if at all, we see Daniel? Because as I was doing this, kind of writing these names down, I kind of think having Gramstad and obviously Heinrich there, you get into, I'm sure there's going to be a point in this season where they get Kalen just on the field for him to get that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd lean towards like under 15, 10 snaps for Daniel Kalen this season.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that, when you bring in somebody like Gramstad, what are you getting? You're getting basically a player coach, the way I'm seeing it. And when I talked to him after he committed here, and came here, he said that coaching is something that he wants to do after his football playing days are over. And just listening to him talk about the game and what he wants to do in it, he just already sounds like a coach. So I think it's just adding a second quarterback coach in that room, with Glenn Thomas basically. And if it comes to it in an emergency situation, I wouldn't bat an eye and throw Jalen out there. He's not going to make a mistake. That's what you want when you need a quarterback out there. If like maybe Dylan's helmet pops off or something, and Heinrich Harburg is dealing with something, or if you just want Jalen to go in there, he's not going to make a backbreaking mistake because he's been there, he's done that, he's played in so many college football games, and I don't care that it's at a NAIA level. He's played a lot of football, and I think that everybody in the room can learn from him because he's looked at coverages, he's thrown against different coverages, he's eluded blitz packages, all that stuff that all that experience that he's gained over there at Northwestern College in Iowa. I think it's going to help everybody. So I wouldn't be surprised if like Jalen like takes a snap or two in an emergency situation at all.
Right. I completely agree. And again, that more than anything, I think that just affects how much, if any, we see Kalen this year, which isn't the worst thing for him. I think a redshirt year, a true redshirt
Absolutely.
year where he's getting plenty of reps on the practice field, has some
Get
time to add some weight.
stronger.
Yep, get into the playbook a little more. And yeah, there's plenty for him to work on. And I think what's being understated as part of all this too is the strides that Heinrich Harburg made this offseason as well, to
Mm-hmm.
where he's cemented himself as QB2. And
Mm-hmm.
on one hand, it's like, okay, we're at the point of fall camp where we're talking about this QB, who's going to be QB3. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, if you've watched Nebraska football, that QB3 could become important at some point this year. There's no
Yeah.
like knock on wood, but there's a point every year it feels like where it's like, oh, who's next up off the bench if this guy goes down, and you kind of need to know. So, but at least at this year, Nebraska's got 3, 4 guys they can get into it and feel somewhat comfortable that that guy behind center can at least make the right decision on the field.
Husker fans like know all too well about the injury stuff with their quarterbacks, and you're absolutely right, Tim. If something happens to Dylan, you got an experienced guy right behind him in Heinrich Harburg, who showed, like I thought in the spring, and from what we've seen through some small glimpses at fall camp practices, I mean his throwing motion is improved. I think the elbow comes up higher when he's throwing. Last year it was like that shortstop kind of sidearm throw, but I and obviously 6'5", 230 pounds. There's a lot that you can do with Heinrich Harburg. He can bring a different element to the offense with that quarterback run game and force defenses to kind of put that extra hat in the box and try out that new arm if that comes to fruition, and I think he'd impress some people. So Nebraska's quarterback room, I don't know, it's very interesting, and I'm leaning toward interesting in a good way too.
For sure. Turning to the running backs, there's only one new addition or summer addition at running back, Makai Nelson. Curious to think what you think here. Do you think he sees the field much? How does he kind of fit into the room right now?
I don't. And it's nothing against Makai Nelson. I think he's a talented kid and everything, but I don't think there's just a lot to beat out in that room and ahead of him, right? I mean, he just got here in the summer. He's got a lot of new things going on. True freshman. So, I think he's maybe just like, put away a red shirt and build toward the future type player.
Right. And I think as part of this conversation, we can talk about Dante Dowdle, the transfer addition to the room.
Yep.
Obviously, we think Dowdle's going to play,
Mhm.
kind of working into that running back rotation. I think it's too early to call it one way or the other, but how much do you think Dowdle plays? Is this one of those you think he starts the year strong and maybe dies out towards the end, or is it kind of like a reverse where he starts off maybe slow third or fourth in that rotation and maybe ends the year at the top of that running back rotation?
I think the latter part of what you said. I think he maybe starts off a little bit slow, but towards the end of the season, October, November, I think you might be seeing him get more carries once the temperature goes down. Guys don't like to get hit by big backs more often. I think that's where you're going to see Dante Dowdell get more action. So I think when we talked to EJ Barthel at the press conference couple weeks ago, he said he's looking for a 3-man rotation right now, and I think everybody's kind of agreeing on that 3 right now: Emmett Johnson, Ramir Johnson, and then Gabe Ervin Jr. But he said there's 4 names right now battling for that 3-man rotation, and that 4th guy is likely going to be Dante Dowdell. So, and Quentin Ives, interesting player. He doesn't really look like the rest of the running backs in that room. He's just so tall. Kind of looks almost like a big body receiver almost, or maybe like a safety at 6'3", 210. But I think sort of like Makai Nelson. I think he's just, he redshirted last year. I just don't think it's his time this fall, but I think he's a good one for the future.
Wide receiver room. I think there's a couple of names in here that are intriguing. I think we can both agree Carter Nelson, Ja'Cory Barney are both going to play this year. Probably play a lot. Probably going to burn their red shirt,
Mhm.
as long as they're healthy. Behind those guys, a couple other receivers: Keelan Smith, Isaiah McMorris, David Hall. Outside of the top 2, how much do you think we see of the other like receivers in the room?
Yeah, and you and I are both high on Quinn Clark, and maybe not at receiver down the road. Who knows what position he's going to ultimately end up at, because the height. I think his frame can support a lot more weight than it is, and he's just a true freshman, so a lot of stuff will come. But outside of Carter Nelson, Ja'Cory Barney, I really like Keelan Smith. I mean, it really takes talent to be the offensive player of the year in the state of Missouri. And he came to the program with Big Ten size already at 6'3" and 210 pounds. I'm really, really excited about him, but I just don't know how much, like who's he going to play over is what I always ask myself. And with the receiver room being so stacked as it is with some veteran guys and some really, really talented, like play right away guys like Carter Nelson and Ja'Cory Barney, I just don't see a lot of snaps for Keelan Smith, but maybe he's a four guy, like play him in 4 games and then redshirt after that. So but I'm really high on Keelan Smith, but Carter Nelson, I really think it's cool what the coaching staff decided to do with him to start. Look, I mean, he's an incredible talent with at 6'5", 230 pounds. He's a big bodied receiver. I don't think he's ever going to turn into a traditional inline tight end because I don't think you want to see Carter Nelson at like 240 or 250 pounds, something like that, and blocking defensive ends. No, I want to see him detached from the formation and matched up on a linebacker or a safety and running routes
Yeah, you
like a
want him
small.
running loose. You want him running free, like
Yes.
just being able to use that explosive athletic ability, just having
Yes.
all of that, and not getting bogged down by extra weight. Um,
100%. And it's he's never blocked before. Like
right.
at Ainsworth playing an 8-man football, Ainsworth needed the ball in his hands to win football games, and they did. They won a lot of football games with him doing that. And when I talked with Carter during his signing ceremony in Ainsworth, shout out Ainsworth by the way, but he was just straight up honest with me and said, "Look, I haven't been asked to block. That's going to be an area of my game that I need to learn to do." And I know he's listed at 6'5", 230, but I think that you need to continue working on becoming a stronger football player. Because the guys that he's going to be asked to block in the future are men in this conference. I mean, these guys are going to be playing the NFL, and it's just going to be really hard for Carter Nelson to step in and try blocking those guys. So what Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield want to do is, I think, just the great plan of having him focus on being a receiver.
For sure. Yeah, and I think he's another one like Dowdle. I think his role grows as the season progresses as well. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
you see him
Yeah,
featured early on and in specific roles, and then as the season, come in November, it's like, okay, Carter Nelson's just regularly out there. I feel like we're gonna have that conversation at some point.
as time has went on and the coaches have talked more about him and he's actually gotten in the program, I think it's become apparent that Carter Nelson is going to go blow past that 4-game redshirt rule, and Ja'Cory Barney too, because I think Ja'Cory Barney, he's just like too exciting. He has too much
Yeah.
juice with the ball in his hands.
Yeah. And they'll
He
find a
like,
way to get the ball even if it's not
it's
as
not
in
even
the
on offense too. Like he
right,
could
exactly.
be a
Special teams.
returner in the special teams, like either punt or kickoff return. Like you got to give him the ball and see what that kid can do. Because and what I like most about Ja'Cory Barney is the confidence. Like I don't think he's cocky, but like he knows that he belongs on a Big Ten football field, and he knows that he can do a better job than some older players on the roster right now. And I think that's like I want that in my skill guy. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I want my guy, my kick returner, my punt returner, my slot receiver, who I can like maybe give a handoff to on a jet motion or maybe one of those touch passes. I want that guy to be extremely confident, and I think Ja'Cory Barney has that in him. It's very cool.
Yeah, and if Nebraska gets like a recruit, like a truly like a returning specialist out of him, like especially if his year one role is just recruiting or returning specialist with working into that wide receiver rotation because you've got some bodies there now.
Yeah.
That's ideal. Like that's perfect, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for him. And you see that role continue to grow, continue to gain some confidence, and so that bond with Rayola starts to build as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start thinking about life. Obviously, not yet. The season hasn't even started yet, but you got to start thinking about what life kind of looks like without Jamal Banks and potentially, down the line. So it's like you need someone else to step up and
Yeah.
not to say Barney is necessarily that guy, but that's a guy that will find ways to kind of win inside and out. Of the freshmen, like I don't think we see a whole lot of Isaiah McMorris specifically, just because he's the smallest guy in the room right now. Like he's just going to need some time to
I think
add some
Davon Hall too. You can
Hall as
stack two
well.
of
Like
those.
I
Yeah.
think both those guys, I don't think we see much, if anything, from them this year. Not a bad thing. I think those guys,
No. Yeah.
yeah, those guys and Kalen are very familiar with each other. They
Mm-hmm.
understand their role within the program and kind of understand like it's a longer track, not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, wouldn't be surprised if you see like Keelan Smith, maybe late in that UTEP game, maybe like a
Sure.
Big Ten game or two where Nebraska's got it comfortably in hand and or comfortably out of hand.
That's the
Again,
hope. Yeah.
God forbid, but
Mm-hmm.
you think Keelan kind of factors into that rotation as well. Another one, I tight end. Obviously Carter's no longer quote unquote in the tight end room, But Eric Ingwerson out of Papiola Vista, he's on the team. We saw him in practice, looks the part, at least physically.
Yeah, he's huge. He's
He's big,
huge.
large man, and
Yeah.
moves well for that size. I was really
Yeah.
impressed, kind of how fluid he is, kind of moving at that size.
Mhm.
I know there's been some discussion about him potentially converting to an offensive tackle down the line, but he's got some like legit upside as a blocking tight end and can create a little bit after the catch. Obviously that tight end room's so deep. Does he factor in there at all, do you think, or is he just kind of sitting back? Where does he kind of fit in?
I don't think so. I think he's in for a redshirt year, but that's nothing against him. I just think that, I just think that the guys that he would need to play over, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I mean, the headliner is obviously Thomas Fidone. We know that he's potentially in for a very big year. It's his second season coming back healthy after two straight ACLs. And whenever you get an ACL, it's always the coaches, players, they all say it. It's that second season back healthy where you really kind of return to your old form almost and really start having some success and feeling like you're actually back. But outside of Thomas Fidone, I mean, it's the Bash Bros, Nate Borkature and Luke Lindenmeyer. Yeah, in terms of Eric Ingwerson, I think he's in for a redshirt. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think for him, I think the developmental path should be, hey, just look at what Luke's doing and do what Luke's doing. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the like your goal should be to be like Luke and maybe even Nate. The other freshman tight end in that room might have a better chance just because he got here in the spring, Ian Flint, and he kind of
Mm-hmm.
impressed in the Flint, kind of flashed a little bit in the spring, had a nice little catch and run in the spring game, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Like an impressive player that's kind of arrived on campus. I think he's closer to like a Borkershire than he is a Lindenmeyer, just because he's got some blocking experience, but can really create after the catch, like a very fluid mover for his size, a little more compact than Ingwerson is. I like again, I like you kind of mentioned, like this room is so loaded, but
Mm-hmm.
behind those three, I think if you're calling one more off the bench, I think it's Flint, not Ingwerson. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say probably, yeah, we're digging deep here. I think Ian Flint might be the call or we should mention the new addition to the room, which is an old addition, AJ Rollins, who
Yes.
moved from defense. So he came to Nebraska as a tight end. Rule switched him over to defensive end, which he played last season. And I think he was still at defensive end in the spring, but in fall, all of a sudden we saw him running with the tight ends, and AJ Rollins is back at tight end. So I I don't
Yeah,
know. I
I
mean,
guess yeah. Like that's a lot of bodies in there. Not a bad thing to have.
yeah,
Not a
there's
bad
just a
problem
lot
at
of
all. But
options. I like it.
yeah, the O line's interesting. The O line I
Yeah, it
think is
is.
really interesting because it's a
Yeah, it
lot of
is.
names in there. Um, I personally think there's three names that could play. I
Okay.
wonder if I don't know how many names you have, but I think there's three names that could play. And I wrote it up in my notebook last week just from observing practice. I think there's two three guys in this room or two three freshmen in the room specifically that I think need just a little bit of a runway. But the top three, I think Grant Bricks. I think depending on what the extent of his injury is, Preston Tuamu
Yeah.
and Gibson Pyle.
Mm.
Number three, Gibson Pyle, Klein Kane's finest. But I think those three see the field this year, and I think Landon Davidson, Alexander Ruger, I don't even know how to say his last name, but
Xander
Rugeroli
Rugeroli.
and Jake Peters. I think those guys need a bit of a runway, but just because looking at them in that room compared to the others, they're just smaller right now, and
Mm.
that's not a thing that'll come with time. Like Landon Davidson's already like pretty muscled up, but needs to continue adding some mass. Peters. I think just needs like he's well built right now, but kind of fits into that interior. And you've got some depth on the interior right
And
now.
and we should note with Jake Peters, I believe it was Rule who said that he's going to be missing some time. He had
Okay.
lower leg surgery on something on that. So Jake Peters is going to be out of commission for oh, I think multiple games into the season. By the way, your pick at three would have been my pick. Grant Bricks, absolutely.
How much I was going to say, how much do you think we see of these three specifically that I think play?
So when you said those three names, were you thinking they're playing more than 4 games or no?
I think maybe one does. I
I
don't
don't
think all
think any of
three.
them do.
Okay.
But if I had to pick one, maybe Preston Talmua.
Yeah.
just from, and I know last time we saw him at practice, he was in a yellow jersey on a stationary bike, but like he looked like whatever he was holding it back wasn't that serious. But I love Preston Talmua. I love the look of him. He looks scary. He looks mean. He looks
He
like he's
looks
going to
ready to
compete.
play. Like he looks
Absolutely.
like he came on campus pretty ready to play. And we both noted that back in June when we saw him.
Yes. I want to follow. If I need to go down a dark alley, I'm following Preston Talmua. I don't think any of them really go past that 4 game mark, but that just speaks to the depth, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think more like I think I was going to say Tuamu, but also like I do just from what we heard from the spring, Pyle had a really good spring and is kind of carried that over into a pretty solid fall so far. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think there's a chance you see him potentially in some rotational guard snaps, but I think Bricks is intriguing, and I think maybe there's some people that maybe raise an alarm bell at the fact that he may not burn his red shirt this year. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Like coming from,
Absolutely not.
he hasn't really pass blocked in his life. Like that's
No.
just something that's going to take some
Yeah.
time. Like the staff remains really high on his upside.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in with this pedigree of this, elite blue chip recruit, like
Mm-hmm.
has a chance to be this cornerstone tackle down the line, but it was never going to be year one. And the fact that you get an opportunity now to just kind of work him in the practice field, maybe 2, 3 deep,
Mm-hmm.
where he's not even really like there's no expectation on him to be ready or do any of that. He can just focus
Mm-hmm.
on fine-tuning technique, adding some mass to his large frame.
Mm-hmm.
And just continue developing. Like I think that's the biggest thing for him right now
Yeah.
is development. So curious to
And
see
it's
kind of how much, if any, we see of him this year.
it's different with offensive linemen, right? Than it is with like everybody else on the football field. If you get like a high 4-star or a 5-star skill guy, he's playing right away, right? But I don't think it's similar with offensive linemen. It's just a totally different world when you get out there. They're playing against monsters, grown men, 22, 23-year-olds, and they're only 18, 19 years old. It's just different with offensive linemen. So it is okay if you get a highly touted offensive line recruit and you sit them for a year.